מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב. נצור לשון חמרה ושפתך מדבר מרמה, סור מרב עשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב.
L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachet hashemayim. There is a season for everything. Time for each experience under heaven. Time to be born and a time to die. Time to plant, a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down, a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather them. A time to embrace, a time to pause from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear, a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. These words of the sage Ecclesiastes, they lift up to our hearts as we gather and remember a precious friend. Death has taken Shelley from us. He is missed so deeply already. The gifts of his heart and mind, his generous heart, his open mind, his unique, inimitable presence, they are a precious legacy to us. For all gathered here in this community, chiefly officiating today, Cantor Vladimir Lapin and myself, Rabbi Rob Nosenchuk, Fairmount Temple. We'll be joined in a moment by Rabbi Hal Rudin-Luria from B'nai Yeshurun congregation. And as I mentioned to the family back there, the man had rabbis everywhere. Watch out on the way to Shiva. We're going to stop you for a few Divrei Torah before Shabbos. But everyone is remembering now the moments shared, the times of celebration, the times of difficulty, times of warmth and closeness, times of his deep love and companionship, mixed with that sense of remembrance, remorse, sadness, and a bit of shock. The family also comes here today with gratitude. Gratitude not only for his life well lived, but for his acceptance, his sense of contentment and willingness to admit when things needed more care, more attention, when his worries meant a lot, and when accepting caregiving was something that he had always given, but now needed. I have been asked by Dan and Josh and their families to specifically shout out the amazing care provided to Shelley by Jackie Cooley and her crew, Calvin Cooley, Tamika Cooley, Gina Morrison, Janelle Motley, Jasmine Green. As much as you're going to hear today and in the coming days about Shelley, you're going to hear about gratitude for his life, for the care he gave and that which he received, for the decent way in which he lived his life, and his faith in pride in our Jewish tradition. Psalm 23 says, Adonai roi lo echsar. I invite you to join with me, if you wish, in the recitation of Psalm 23. We say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Ata imadi, thou art with me. The faith of the psalmist is echoed today in the feelings I know Shelley's family has about you being here physically, and the many of you gathered virtually, either now or later, connecting with, remembering with, sending solidarity to the family. They invite you, after the conclusion of our service here at Berkowitz-Kumin-Bookatz Memorial Chapel, to join us for the brief service of interment at Mayfield Cemetery. After the service of interment, the family and friends will gather at Shelley's home at 270 Blossom Lane, Chagrin Falls. That will be today, following services and interment until 6 p.m., and then continuing after the conclusion of Shabbat on Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m., also at 270 Blossom Lane. Friends who wish may contribute to Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple or B'nai Yeshurun congregation, and of course are invited to continue to offer your gestures of love, condolence, sympathy, your memories of this incredible guy over the days and weeks to come. I'm glad to call on my colleague, Rabbi Hal Rudin-Luria, to share a couple of comments now in remembrance of Shelley.
Thank you, Rabbi Nossenchuk. Shelley's Hebrew name was Shlomo, Solomon. And if we think about Shelley, King Solomon was, of course, the man considered the most wise in the world. And I was blessed to know Shelley in many ways through his participation, involvement, and membership at B'nai Yeshurun, but mostly as a conscientious, curious, engaged learner, who after any session would stay late with many questions. He wanted to delve deep. He wanted to truly know, to come at an issue, at a source, at a question, so he could fully wrap his head around it and then apply it to his life. Shelley was so devoted to his family, devoted to Frankie, a blessed memory, to his children, his sons, his daughters-in-law, and his grandchildren. And I was blessed to see the nachas of seeing his grandchildren at their smachot, at their b'nai mitzvah, and to see him kvel over each and every one of you. And we know how much he loved each and every one of you. And this large Polster family, you are glue, and Shelley was one of those components that brought you together. Shelley was a mensch who lived with kindness. He strove to follow the ways of King Solomon, to be wise, to be just, to give care to so many, and watch over those who were not only in his quote-unquote kingdom, but he really cared for all. in his professional life and in his family life and in his communal life. We miss Shelley, and we know that his name will only bring blessings. Shlomo HaMelech, our King Solomon, will be remembered with love. Thank you.
Contemporary Rabbi Chaim Stern wrote the following words that form one of the meditations in our prayer book. The light of life, he wrote, is a finite flame. Like a candle, life is kindled, burns, glows, is radiant with warmth and beauty, but it fades. Its substance is consumed, it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen, the flames dance, but our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more, are no more seen. But we do not despair, for we are more than a memory slowly fading into darkness. With our lives, we give life. So something of us can never die as we move in the eternal cycle of darkness, death, light, and life. These words echo a prayer for our friend, a precious human being in this community, our Sheldon Polster. I sure feel blessed to have known Shelley during the last 14 years of his life, almost 50 of which he and Frankie had spent invested as members at Fairmount Temple. Due to his longevity in years, his tremendous sincerity, his keen self-awareness about the values that motivated and moved him, I got to see, just like Rabbi Hal, his pride at simchas, holidays, being together with others in our community. And in Shelley's case, it was a privilege to have him sit close by me at a study table where his curious mind sought out knowledge and insight. Not all of our adult education students keep notebooks and refer you after class to a different interpretation they heard from Rabbi Klein about the same passage. Not all of our students bring that thirst for knowledge to be quenched equally by making contact with the people nearby whom they learn. Early in my tenure at Fairmount Temple, I told our extended family at a dinner about teaching in a class that Shelley was in. I described him, but I hadn't yet mentioned his name. When I did, a smile just beamed from my mother-in-law, Ruth Berger's face, because I was describing the same classmate and friend that she had known since they graduated together. Well, it would have been 7 decades now from Heights. I would tease Shelley and many of his immediate loved ones since that time that his presence and accessibility to me have helped me answer what in Cleveland has been the most oft question asked to me as a rabbi. You might think it would be, why do bad things happen to good people? Or, Rabbi, why do some observe 7 days of Passover and others 8? Nope. Here in Cleveland, the question I've been asked most often over the last portion of my career is, which pollster is related to which pollster? I'm not kidding around. If one of you could help me with a crash course on the pollsters before the afternoon is up, I'd like some help. Shelley's sister Judy told me yesterday it's no surprise that Shelley was part of helping me address that question, because to so many in the wider family, it was his caring, his assertiveness. Eliana mentioned his calls, his interest in each member of the family, however extended, their undertakings, his admiration of the things they believed in or things they had tried. That was a wonderful glue to that extended large family of cousins, nieces, nephews, in-laws, everyone. It has moved her greatly to know how many relatives have made it their business to drive or fly across numerous borders to get themselves to this gentle space, to help his younger sister remember a great man Whether you're connecting to this service by live stream or you're just holding Shelley's memories in your heart today, there is gratitude to a mensch, a very decent human being, a wise and prudent physician, a giving and hopeful papa or grandpa, devoted husband, father, precious friend, whose physical substance we see no more, but who is more than a memory slowly fading into the darkness. With Sheldon Polster's life, he gave life. In the last couple of days, as I've been talking most closely with his inevitably proud sons, Dan and his Amy and Josh and his Eliana, and each of their children, the thing that I came to know, which I didn't already realize, is the tremendous consistency this man carried into every setting. He reserved incredible pride for his late wife, Frankie, who is loved and held today in our memories. But he shared his character, his generosity to people with whom others might have been less patient. He found a spark of light in patients or other medical colleagues. He could seek to bring a smile to the face of acquaintances, of friends or friends of acquaintances, with the same vigor as he would anyone else. If you knew Shelley, you knew the same Shelley everywhere. Someone who bore goodness and decency, who it is true has died, but the light of his soul continues to shine on us. For Dan and Josh, this is a very different status in life you have now entered. It's startling to have first so deep into your life at least one of your parents, but now to walk forward tonight into the first Shabbat in your life that you can only greet your dad in your minds, or when you allow him to borrow your eyes to see the way that each of his grandchildren are surrounded by a reservoir of friendship just like him. He won't need a clue to know they are grieving someone. He also won't need a clue to know they're living. In the days of Shiva to come, as people are listening to Julia, Vanessa, Shauna, Rylan, Leah, and Gideon talk about their Grandpa Shelley or their Papa Shelley, their patriarch had simple needs they will describe today, either through words I will read or that their dads will share. Mainly, he assured them that he was content with his portion in life. A man born in 1936 had a remarkable way of finding a sweet spot to still make enduring bonds with people born in varying years that all began with the sound 2000 and something. Let's not kid ourselves. Shelley wasn't at ease with technology, texting them back and forth so easily, but he efforted to make connections in his own way. His phone messages and voicemails, the quiet moments in which he'd invite kids close to watch him watch his beloved Browns choke, or to cheer on the Guardians, the Cavs, or any other Cleveland institution of any import had something special to show off. Those were moments to savor. Ryland says Grandpa would tell you he loved you, but then he'd worry, had he told you enough that he loved you before, and so he'd ask you if he tells you that enough. Did you know how proud he was of you? Shauna talks about how Papa Shelley would say he was cavelling over you. He said it with 2 syllables, and he pronounced the cheese you might want to spread over your pasta tonight as Parmesan cheese. Apparently, he pronounced the Yiddish term for talking at length, schmoosing, rather than schmoozing. Leah says Grandpa asked her what she might want to pursue as a career, and she confessed she didn't know yet, so she asked his opinion. She won't ever forget him talking out loud his various ruminations about her future. But the verdict turned out to be, I just want you to be happy and healthy. One moment. When preparing for the funeral for Frankie years ago, he told my colleague Rabbi Caruso about how he'll never forget meeting Frankie. He had met her once and blew it. But a couple of years later, a fellow serviceman in the armed forces named Silverman, Barney Silverman, Jewish, brought him to Miami Beach to meet a friend of a friend. When he met her, he became forever smitten for the rest of their lives. It took work to continue their relationship long distance at first. It took work once they began a life together to build a medical practice that could help him be a provider without cheapening his strong commitment to be a presence in the lives of their kids. I'm guessing, in fact, I'm pretty sure it took quite a lot of work and effort and patience to put up with the shenanigans of two respected Cleveland doctors named Dr. Josh Polster and Dr. Dan Polster when they were growing up. But Frankie and Shelley's marriage on August 28, 1968, in the courtyard at Fairmount Temple, launched the kind of work he loved to love, making a life of enduring meaning, strength, and blessing. He had known from odd jobs growing up what it was to do hard work, or at least to make others think he was working real hard. He had clever ways to manage his job as a postal worker or as a soda jerk in time to get home to be spoiled rotten by his Grandma Nellie with anything that he wanted to help him advance his plans or satiate his appetite. These memories stretch back to his early upbringing in Glenville when he was growing up, when he got active in community here in Cleveland Heights, where he worked so hard to achieve the grades that would lead him to, of all places in that era, Kenyon College, and then to finish at Western Reserve and subsequently medical school. You don't need me to tell you, Shelley Polster was up to hard work, all the way until the limitations and frailties and infirmities of life squeezed him, as they do all of us one day, just too tight. His granddaughter Julia says, "One of the things I admire the most about my grandfather is the earnestness with which he lived life. It always seemed that his motivations were very pure, moral, and warm-hearted. He wanted to have a career, but more importantly, to raise a family and keep them happy, healthy, and safe. If he had those things, he'd be otherwise content, along with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches when available." My grandfather's memory was not the best in the last few years of his life, Julia writes, and conversations with him were somewhat repetitive. We would talk on the phone about every other day when I was away at school, and normally he would tell me his story about meeting Jack E. Leonard when he was around my age. We had lots of discussions about old comedians. He'd ask the same questions about my classes, my career plans, my social life. In fairness to him, sometimes my answers changed. The calls would almost always end with him saying, "I love you and I'm proud of you," and then asking, "Do I tell you that too often or not enough?" To which I'd reply just the right amount. There was always a sense that I was humoring him there. He really did say it a lot. I don't know if he realized how much his routinely telling me he was proud of me furthered his goal of keeping me happy, healthy, and safe. Some days at school, when comparing myself to others or small personal or academic failures get me down, it was hard to feel proud of myself. Being reminded that this great man loves me and is proud of me is such a great gift that would always lift my spirits. Right now, it feels like my answer to the question should have always been, not enough. But I'm so grateful to know his legacy of kindness means I will always receive the same unconditional love from our family, and that I will continue to try and make him proud. Shelley's granddaughter Shauna wrote the following words to me. Shauna writes, Papa Shelley would always ask if he told us he loved us and if he was proud of us too often. I'm so proud of you. Do I tell you that too much? I always said no, just right. He should have known that he could never have said it too much. I hate the fact, though, that I'll never hear him say that to me again. I miss his voice and the knowledge that I can't stop by his house and know he's going to be there. I can't surprise him and show up to see him sitting in his chair reading his newspaper, even though he told me all the time. I don't think I told my grandpa enough just how proud of him we all were. I always wanted to hear stories about his life and try to piece together the incredibly impressive life he led. I was in awe of him, and I still marvel at all he accomplished. His father, an immigrant who never had the opportunity to utilize the intelligence he had, Papa Shelley radiated brilliance and excelled through grade school and college, taking himself all the way through medical school to become the amazing pulmonologist he was. He lived out the American dream his father came here for. And although Papa Shelley was a certified worrier, he did one of the bravest things to do, and he joined the Air Force. Then he met my grandma and started the family that I love, raising two amazing sons, ingraining his own compassion and love within them. One thing I loved about Papa Shelley is how he never said a bad thing about anybody, even if they deserved it. We could be talking about the worst person in the world, and still he would tell me, hate is a little strong of a term. It was infuriating sometimes to not get the validation I wanted, but he didn't judge or see bad sides of anyone. Papa Shelley was interested in the most dull of conversations, really caring about the person in front of him. He always saw people through rose-tinted glasses, seeing the best in everyone, and I think this is why he loved to schmooze. He genuinely wanted to talk to each and every person and hear about their lives. I love every single memory I have with him. I appreciate every moment we spent together, even though I wish we could have had more. I have a million stories I can tell about him, but I decided to tell one in particular today. Shauna explains, I was 6 years old and at Park Day Camp for the summer. My group was walking in line to go to pick up, and I saw a tall man in a bucket hat walking right towards us. Only one man had that hat, and only one could be wearing it indoors. I ran up to my papa and gave him a big hug, both of us surprised to see each other. He was dropping off a book or two at the Park Synagogue Library. He was so excited to see me, but I was even more excited to see him. The story represents so much of what I loved about Papa Shelley. First, that he went to 1,000,000 different temples, because in his mind, the more temples you went to, the better Jew you are. It's true. Everybody, get to temple. Papa Shelley was certainly the best Jew there was. He would even write pray on his to-do list each day. We would joke that he wished to go to all the temples at once. You can do that now with live streaming. Second, I love the constant desire that he had to learn more about Judaism and the world, always reading books on Israel and politics. The most surprising part of the story is that he was returning the library books and not just keeping them in his house forever. He never stopped educating himself, watching one-day universities till the end and never failing to tell me about them. What I love most, I wrote that part twice here, it looks like. But I loved everything about Papa Shelley. He's supporting me even though I might not realize he's there, down to the little quirks that he would joke about. I love how he would tell me I looked like a supermodel, even though I told him he was wrong. But in his eyes, I really did look like a supermodel. I love that every time I saw him, he would tell me I looked taller, even though I told him I wasn't. Because in his eyes, he had seen me grow up. I love that he was proud of me, even for the smallest of achievements. I would always call him to tell him good news, and he was so excited about every little thing I accomplished because in his eyes, he was watching his legacy continue. He was so excited when I went to Israel this summer. This was somewhere he had never had a chance to go. I am sad I didn't get to spend that month with him, but I know he was proud of me for being in the land of our people. for myself and for him. Even as his memory declined over the past few years, Papa Shelley never lost his brilliance, love, and kindness that he had all his life. He was the most purely kind person I have ever known. I tried to visit him as often as I could, to feel his kindness, to hear his stories, to talk about our days, to get his philosophy on life. I hope he knows that his life lessons and words of wisdom will stick with me and motivate me for the rest of my life. Whether it's better to be too careful than not careful enough, or that's what not to do, a point which was the end of many stories he told me. I think I could write forever about how much I love my Papa Shelley, but I know other people have beautiful memories they want to share too. I'm sure there isn't anyone in this room who has a bad memory of my grandpa. I'm sure that everyone here remembers him as a kind, wonderful man that I hold in my heart. We are crushed by losing this amazing person, my favorite person. But we are happy. He is with my beautiful Grandma Frankie and did not suffer. Papa, everyone here today is here because we love you so much. We are so proud of you. From her new room at college, granddaughter Vanessa writes, if you ask anyone, they would be able to tell you that my grandpa was a proud man. He valued the family he had built more than anything else, a sign of a genuinely good heart. While I have too many memories to share, I want to elaborate on my favorite times with my Papa Shelley. When I told my grandpa I wanted to follow his footsteps and go into medicine, you could tell he was ecstatic. He shared his memories of Western Reserve Medical School, pulmonology training, his time as a doctor in the Air Force. And although his memory wasn't what it used to be, he remembered a lot about being a doctor. We discussed the cystic fibrosis research I was doing and his experiences dealing with lung disease. One of the last times I visited him, he said to his caregivers, she's going to be a doctor, you know. I chuckled it off. I wasn't even in college yet, after all, but I knew he really believed it. And now I'm in college with full intentions of pursuing a career in medicine. I dreamt about the day I could tell him I'd get into medical school. Although I won't be able to see his reaction, I know he will be beaming at me from above. And the day Papa Shelley passed away, I inherited his favorite stethoscope. The day I left for college, I sat on the floor of my room listening to the thump of my own heart. Tears rolling down my cheeks, the sound of blood pumping through my arteries, reminds me that although I was sad, I was alive. Each beat sounding in my ear, a part of him that's alive in my dad, in my uncle, in my cousins, in my sisters, in my future children, and in me. One day, many years from now, when I can finally care for patients the way he cared for his, my heart will beat a little louder, a beautiful reminder that I'm alive, and so is he. Speaking of doctors that Shelley loved, Dr. Amy Polster writes, I met Dr. Sheldon Polster, better known as Papa Shelley, 31 years ago when I started dating his son Daniel at the young age of 18 and was a big fan ever since. To be clear, she's talking about Shelley, Dan. Such a kind, warm, intelligent man who I initially couldn't remember to call doctor and erroneously called Mr. Polster for months or years without him ever correcting me. Many years after being married to his son Dan and I were discussing how many men happen to marry women that are personality-wise like their mothers. Dan realized, as he always had, that he was very similar to his mom, Frankie, and then suddenly realized that I, in fact, am quite similar to his father rather than his mother. We got into such a laugh. The truth is, it was really about Papa Shelley and I both being the expert, or even creative warriors. But it was also quite a compliment, as Papa Shelley was such a sweet, loving, and bright physician, tolerant of nearly all he met, whether they deserved it or not. And just as Shelley and Frankie's marriage has worked well, so does Daniel and mine. As the years passed and I grew closer to Papa Shelley, besides many meals and chats, I even had the chance to shadow him as a medical student in his office at Euclid MedNet. And he, alongside his two sons, gave me my medical diploma from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, where he graduated proudly decades before. He could not have been more proud of his love of his life, Frankie, and his two sons, except when he had grandchildren. He loved Kvel. Every chance he had, he just adored being an incredible grandfather, even better than he could have imagined, he said. He and I would Kvel together about our girls' accomplishments and laugh about our shared love of simple and wonderful things. Fresh squeezed orange juice, shrimp cocktails, hot showers, a good brushing of teeth, warm and cozy socks, and the best, clean underwear. He would always let me know how proud he was of Dan and I as parents. Do I tell you how often I am too proud of you and the girls? He would ask me if my job was okay and if they were treating me okay. He and Frankie raised the most wonderful man, my husband Daniel, to love me, and then gave me the added bonus of loving me like their own daughter. So I will always feel great pride when Daniel or anyone compares me to Dr. Sheldon Polster. I know the best of him will carry on, and Daniel, Julia, Vanessa, and Shauna, and me. Papa, I got your back, worrying about your people. May you rest peacefully. Well, you know, you'll see tributes, and you'll hear them for days and weeks on end now. You can find more memories and reflections posted next to his obituary on the Berkowitz website. At Shiva today, people are going to want to schmoose you for hours on end about this guy, his learning, his many enduring gifts. As I organized my notes for this service, I kind of emailed myself all of those remarks that had been sent my way from loving family members, and I kept running across a quote that I just remembered was at the bottom of my email signature. It was said by our late and lamented Fairmount Temple Rabbi Arthur J. Lelyveld, who said, "We must seek in every branch of a uniquely pluralistic American Judaism to produce earnest, learned, and sincerely devoted Jews committed to the building of a more perfect world." I like that each time I read some of those personal remarks, I was hearing Rabbi Lelyveld's echo. After all, we're here today to remember an earnest, learned, sincere, devoted man, a Jew, committed in his life and energy, and now in his continuing legacy, to a strong family, already building a world that's more perfect. You did that, Shelley. You did it. You did it. Amen.
Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim va'aretz esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri, Ezri, me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim v'aretz, Ezri, me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim v'aretz.
I'm glad to call on Josh and Dan, in whichever order you guys can duke it out, to come up and share some reflections and memories of your dad.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. I will do my best. I'm here to honor my dad and to tease him a little bit too. I think he'd like that. Back in high school, when I was applying to college, I asked my high school math teacher, Mr. Skitsky, for a letter of recommendation. And he asked me to stop by after school, and he kind of did this thing which was clever. He said, I want you to tell me about a hero of yours, someone you admire. Don't tell me who it is, just I want you to tell me about the characteristics of that person. And for those of you that don't know me very well, I'm a big superhero fan. It would have been very easy for me to talk about Superman's strength and moral character, or Batman's grit and determination, or Iron Man's ingenuity. Or I could have gone James Bond route, someone who's very brave in a crisis. Or I could have gone with some real-life heroes, people like Martin Luther King and his vision, or Mother Teresa's compassion. But I didn't. I think you know where this is headed. I thought about my dad. He doesn't really seem like a superhero, though, does he? I mean, it's hard to imagine an author choosing to name his lead character Sheldon Polster. Growing up, I kind of hoped that the name Polster meant something like Fierce Dragon or Lion King. It turns out it's much closer to something like Little Pillow. But putting aside the name, there are other things that didn't quite mesh. My dad was not a great athlete. I was recently thinking about memories of, he would recall his sports stories, and I was counting the number of sports highlights that he had. Rounding to the nearest whole number, I counted 0. But he does have a number of sports failures that I know he would love for you to hear about briefly. So just very briefly, there was a time when he was the backup goalie in college for some big game. I don't remember who they were playing. And they were up 2-0, and they said, Shelley, go in. We're up 2-0, go ahead. The other team came down, kicked the ball towards him. His description is, hit me in the hand, and then he was immediately taken out of the game. He also played on a tennis team, I don't remember at what level, and they were practicing serves, and he was doing pretty well. So the coach gathered the team around him and said, Shelley, show everyone how you serve. So he did, and the coach looked around at everyone, and he said, did you guys see that? That's exactly how not to serve. And then finally, the time when he was in a high school rec league basketball game, and he was fouled with no time left, and his team down by 1, and he had 2 free throws to put the game away. He missed them both. He was a self-deprecating guy, and I think he would like to hear those stories told to him. So he wasn't a heroic athlete. He wasn't really a heroic leader either. I do remember him telling me a story of, apparently, unbeknownst to him, his name being put on a ballot to be like the president of the medical practice. He said, I had palpitations, I was sweating. What if I was elected? Don't worry, he lost. And then on the James Bond front that I mentioned earlier, there's very little detail about this story, but I'll tell you what I know. He was in the Air Force, and apparently he was told that he was going to be going on a secret mission. Possibly to Europe. It's unclear. Well, apparently upon hearing this news about the secret mission, he immediately told his mother, my Grandma Gert. And she went to her hero, the family doctor, Dr. Moore, and asked him to talk my dad out of it, because it wasn't safe, which is a theme. The mission does not seem to have actually occurred at this point. We don't know if it's because of this security breach or because he woke up from his dream. So why do I admire my dad? Well, it's a lot of the things you've heard about already today. His unconditional love. You know, I have some friends who were baseball players growing up, and I remember one friend telling me recently about a time, I'm going to get some of these facts wrong, but basically he was a pitcher, and at the end of a game, the bases got loaded against him, but he struck out the last guy to win the game. And he was very pumped, and he came off the field. His dad was watching the game, and he thought his dad was going to say, you know, way to go, son. And he said something like, it's a good thing he didn't swing at the pitch before that one. I thought he was going to hit a home run off that one. That's totally foreign to me. Just as you heard, my dad's love was totally unconditional. I don't even think he saw performances. He just saw a glowing halo around all the people that he loved. I loved his gentle nature that has been mentioned. His gratitude. He frequently commented about how blessed he was. A lesson that we could all learn from. The simple joys that were listed, including clean underwear among them, but hot showers, clean pajamas, reading the newspaper on the bed, just brought him great joy. I loved the relationships he formed with many people here in this room and beyond. It was not just his immediate family, his extended family, his patients, everyone he met. It's such an important part of life, and I really admire his love of everyone. The love of learning that's been brought up many times. The multiple temple runs on a Saturday to hear sermons or discussions. Siegel College. He and I spent some time learning from Rabbi Nissenbaum from Jewish Learning Center together for a long time. He just loved it. And these last few years, One Day University was a real boon because he really couldn't get around anymore. And it was a way for him to continue to learn, and he loved that. And one of the most important things, I just admired that he avoided the temptation of living for other things, living for accumulation of wealth or fame or prestige. I do want to thank his caregivers, as have already been brought up, but Jackie, Tamika, CJ, Gina, Jasmine, Janelle, and others who allowed him to continue to live and love his life. He was still very happy. finish with, there's a quote that captures something that I think is in probably all kinds of wisdom traditions that you've heard different variations of. I think this one may be attributable to Mother Teresa. It said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. Though I've lost my dad, I take comfort in knowing that my dad, my hero, who never sought to change the world, he never made that a goal. He was not a warrior for justice or titan of industry. But he cast a stone across the lives of his children, his grandchildren, his patients, his friends, all of you. And I take comfort that he has created and will continue to create many ripples that will make the world a better place. Dad, I love you and I'm proud of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Some tough acts to follow here. I think the grandchildren and my wife and brother probably said words better than I could ever come up with. To this day, I've never gotten an answer on how the United States Air Force determines a secret mission has to remain secret from everyone other than Gert Polster. But I guess they have their ways. I wanted also to express gratitude, which you've already heard, for my dad's caregivers, who were angels on earth here, who took care of him even in times when he had COVID, and they gave up their own lives and their holidays to keep him in his home where he wanted to be for the rest of his days. And if I can't get through this, I'm going to tag out to you, okay? I had trouble deciding what to say about my dad, whether to describe him as a man of simple needs or a man with a complex mind, for actually he was both of these things. His needs were simple, and he didn't need much to be happy. Some of this you've heard already. A nice shower, a warm bathrobe, multiple newspapers to read, and the basic foods he liked to eat. Salt-free saltines. Now there's choreography with this next part. A hot turkey sandwich with gravy on the side. A bowl of raisin bran, with emphasis on the bran. Orange juice, large, with a straw, and always with the appropriate hand motions to translate to whatever waitress or provider was giving him his food. He liked going to temple a lot. He loved it. Whether he was going to Torah study at Fairmount, meeting with Rabbi Roger Klein at Silvers, or going to services at Park or B'nai Yeshurun, he loved being there. He, at times, actually would worry that if he went to too many, they would all start charging him dues. And I would sometimes joke with him that if given the opportunity, I was worried he might start attending Mass as well. But most important to him was his family, their love, their companionship, and specifically their health, safety, and well-being. In our earlier years, he would love nothing more than to be surrounded by his kids and our friends, with my mom napping by his side while we all watched the Browns lose every Sunday. But that was when he was in his element. That was when he was his happiest, and he was just so content to be there. In later years, when my mom was gone and his limited ability to walk kept him at home, he still remained a man of simple pleasures. He would love nothing more than going through old photo albums with Shauna as they tried to figure out who everyone was in the pictures, or sharing with us what he had learned that day on One Day University, or how funny he found that day's rerun of Everybody Loves Raymond, which apparently is the only show he would watch. Daily phone messages with us would always begin the same way. Dad calling, nothing important, call when you get a chance. And once we would connect with him, he would kvel with pride over his children, even more so his grandchildren, and frequently admire Josh and I in telling us, you're doing a great job parenting. And if that's true, then we learned it from him. And Josh and I didn't compare notes, but it's funny because the baseball subject comes up. When I was about 8 years old, possibly the worst player in all of Beechwood softball, possibly the history of Beechwood softball, he never expressed embarrassment or disappointment when I would strike out every single time at bat. Rather, he would just show his pride, practice with me every day, pitching to me in the yard until I finally started hitting. But even if I hadn't, he would have been just as proud. He just wanted to spend time with me. Whenever I had a school performance, a piano recital, or otherwise, he was there. There was never a work meeting or other commitment that kept him from being there for Josh or I. And from him, I learned the importance of just being there for the kids and showing infinite patience. I'm not sure my kids would agree that I've achieved that, but it was a goal. But again, there was the complexity to my dad. Even at his most blissful moments, all it took was a sniffle or a complaint that someone had a headache or anything that would threaten that world, those simple joys that he had. And then we saw how complex he became, or as he would have said, very complex, very complex. He was the ultimate worrier, took creative worrying to a new level. And to know him and to love him meant accepting this and even joking with him about it. He worried about things that hadn't even been invented yet. A simple cough would lead to phone calls and consultations with all of the physicians he knew in Northeast Ohio. And he would come to me and ask me, am I a top 10 worrier? To which I would say, yes. And I would remind him what I do for a living. And I would say, yes, you are. He would then go to temple even more, often seeking reassurance from us and from the clergy that he himself was a good person and not somehow the cause of whatever misfortune he perceived. And the irony of him asking that is that he was such a good person. He didn't have to ask that. We throw the term around. We try to describe people as good people because they are friendly or they're generous or they're helpful, but I think those are so superficial. My dad, like my wife Amy, was just pure goodness, deep and throughout his soul. He had no agenda. He had no ulterior motive. All he wanted was to be nice to people and for them to be nice back. At parties, he could strike up a conversation with the most uninteresting person that existed, find their story to be fascinating and make them feel important. Whereas I would be done with that same person after a couple minutes. He could spend hours learning from them until my mother would finally say, "Shelley, let's go." He was a much better man than me in that regard, and I envied and admired that quality in him. For someone so good at heart, he also saw the good in everyone else. And for every person whose quirks or faults I would immediately identify, he would pause to tell me, wait a minute, and to point out their positive qualities. His last public appearance took place earlier this summer when he attended Vanessa's graduation party. Given his limited ambulation and his care needs, we expected him to be there for an hour at most. Instead, he stayed for most of the evening, all smiles, and striking up conversation with anyone who came by the table to see him. Once again, he was in his element. He didn't need anything more than just to be there and seeing everyone and talking to them. So, Dad, I leave you now with a last message. Dan calling, something important. You were a good person, and you did a great job parenting. I wish you an eternity free of worry and just peace. I love you.
As has been demonstrated throughout this reflection and remembrance, our Jewish heritage is fairly humble. But when we pray, we address God straight up. Especially right now, at the conclusion of a service like this, we raise our hand gently and say, El Malei Rachamim, God, you're full of mercy. It's me. It's just me. Show me compassion, show me peace. I'm told that though he never brushed with fame, his once or twice, maybe a few extra times, calls to sports radio stations included Shelley telling the what to and wherefore of the decisions that were being made by the Indians and Browns and other franchises. The man was humble. When they'd ask him his name, he'd say, "It's Sam from Shaker." El Malei Rachamim, God full of compassion, remember our Shelley. Don't make him afraid. It's just Sam from Shaker. He lived with righteousness. We miss him. We invite you now to please rise for the El Malei prayer.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kiddoshim Utehorim Kezohar Arakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Shlomo ben Nechemia Halevi v'Golda Shehalach Le'olamo Bal Harachamim Yastirehu B'Seiter Kenafav Le'olamim V'yitzror b'yitzror hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo V'nomar Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Dr. Sheldon Polster, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, with the holy and pure whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen.
slander others or wrong them will bring shame upon them. Scorn the laws of those who revere God. Give their word and conduct.
Please return directly to your cars, put on your headlights and your hazard flags. Thank you. Especially it's important to say hazard flags, because there's a lot of traffic signals that are still not functioning.
We've always said to me, how are you doing, man?